I'm going to call the November 16, 2022 Williamsburg Planning Commission meeting to order. Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kale?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Tarley?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Sokolowski? Ms. Liebel?
Here.
Thank you. Our first agenda item is the approval of minutes from our October 19 meeting. There was at least one change I know of to the minutes that were posted last Friday. Do any commissioners have other changes or edits? Hearing none, I will ask if there's a motion to approve the October 19, 2022 minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Seconds.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Abstain.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is an open forum. This is the opportunity for folks to come and address the commission about matters that are not on today's agenda. We have a couple of agenda items that, or at least one agenda item that we will have specific public open forum for, but if you have anything you'd like to address the commission about other than that pending application, now would be the time. I see some people moving around, but I don't see anybody coming forward. I guess everybody's here for that application, so I'll close this open forum. We move on then to consent agenda item SPR 22-010. With consent agenda items, we don't have a presentation and we don't have discussion from the commission. However, a commissioner can ask for the item to be removed from the consent agenda. Is anybody interested in removing the item from the consent agenda? Okay. This is the Bray School relocation, which I think is one of the more exciting things that we've had the opportunity to look at. Is there a motion to approve SPR 22-010?
Second.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Okay, we move to the next agenda item, which is PCR 22-014.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, due to a conflict of interest, I'm the managing member of Kale Development LLC, so I'm going to recuse myself for this hearing and the rest of the meeting and join the audience.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kale. Ms. Griffin, I believe you have the staff presentation for us.
Yes, sir.
And let me just say real quickly, we're going to have Ms. Griffin's presentation by staff, and there'll be opportunity for us to ask Ms. Griffin questions. And then the applicant has a presentation, so if you have questions that may be better for the applicant than Ms. Griffin, you can hold those, but we'll have questions for her, and then we'll have the applicant's presentation, okay? Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Good afternoon, Chairman Boswell, members of the Planning Commission. The city has received a request from Kale Development LLC to rezone property located at 180 Strawberry Plains Road. This property is approximately 13.91 acres. It is located now in the single-family dwelling district, that is RS2, and the property is being requested to be rezoned to RM2, which is our multifamily dwelling district. The property is located approximately 0.25 miles from the intersection of Ironbound Road and Monticello Avenue. The property fronts on Strawberry Plains Road between 150 and 195 Strawberry Plains Road. This is the Newtown Professional Center and the Stetson Dental Studio. Also surrounding the property is College Woods and Berkeley Middle School. From a zoning perspective, surrounding the property are zoned RS2 and also William and Mary and LB4 conditional. The yellow here is RS2. The light pink there is LB4 conditional. And then the green is College Woods, and that is zone William and Mary. I wanted to give a comparison of the zoning. So right now, the property is zoned RS2. This property, this zoning district only allows for single-family detached homes at the time. And in order for a single-family detached home to be built, the square footage of the property must be at least 12,500 square feet. Using the calculations that are in the proposal, there would be approximately 46 single-family detached homes which could be built here by right. The applicant, is requesting the RM2 zoning, and this zoning allows for townhouses. The zoning ordinance is specific, saying that there can be up to 14 dwelling units per net acre, and this would be 187 potential townhomes, and the applicant is proposing 120 townhomes. Anytime that we get a rezoning, what we do is go back and look at our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan is a 10-year plan that the city rolls out for the vision of the city, specifically when it comes to land use. And the brown area that you see here, the future land use map, indicates that this area will be mixed use. This is in Chapter 2 of our comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan for the city was just adopted in September of last year. If you go to Chapter 5, which is neighborhoods in the comp plan, it is specifically talking about various neighborhoods in the city, and it calls out Strawberry Plains Road area. It states, if the master plan is for a residential-only mixed-use development, a proffered RM1 or RM2 zoning may be more appropriate. Since rezoning is required to implement the higher residential density, proffers could be submitted to guarantee affordable/workforce housing. So on its face, just by looking at Chapter 2, this development would not be able to take place. However, based on Chapter 5 neighborhoods, if the city received a plan for residential only, it would have to be either for RM1 or RM2 as stated in Chapter 5. This is the concept plan that we received from the applicant. Here, just to go over a few highlights, you'll see that at the bottom of the screen on the right, you have various amenities. There is a playground, a building there, a community building. There is a pickleball. There's also a parking lot for the playground and the amenities. The applicant is suggesting that he will provide the amenities to the neighbors in Strawberry Plains subdivision for a nominal fee. Here you see laid out 120 townhomes and the street connections. There are sidewalks throughout, which is a requirement of the RM2 district. I do want to say that a concept plan is just that. It's conceptual. If this was approved, they would have to provide us full-blown site plan, which has pages of information dealing with stormwater, parking, landscaping, all the things that you would normally see in a development. But for conceptual purposes and for rezoning, this is all that is required to be provided. The main entrance into the development will be located between the 150 and 195 Strawberry Plains Road, and a second entrance is shown here off of our street. This was a question at the beginning of this process. This was shown first as an emergency access. Staff did ask what this was going to be, and we received this that showed this as a entrance into our street. Trying to see if there's anything else on here that I need to point out to you. One thing that we thought was important was to provide sidewalk access to Berkeley Middle School. So you do see there that there is sidewalk access going on to Berkeley Middle School so that students that stayed in the townhouse unit will be able to walk within the subdivision to the school. Transitional screening and recreational open space is also depicted on the concept plan. Both of these are required features of the RM2 zoning district. The district requires at least 50% of the gross lot area has to be landscaped open space, and a minimum 200 square feet of active recreational space must be provided for each unit. So this equates to 24,000 square feet. In regards to traffic, again, for a rezoning, a traffic impact analysis is not required. However, the zoning ordinance does state that the planning director or the planning commission can require a traffic impact analysis. analysis. So I thought it was important to require that, and so that's why you have that in your packet. And this was provided to VDOT. VDOT received this as anytime that we have a rezoning, they would receive the concept plan. They also received the traffic impact analysis after that was provided to us. And based on the traffic impact analysis, it does say that a left turn lane would be required. Commenting back from VDOT, they agreed with this and said that if this was to go through, that it would be required and that would have to be approved. All plans, construction plans approved by VDOT. A right turn lane was not suggested for this development. And we do have someone here from Land Tech that can speak to the traffic impact analysis. Actually, the engineer that put that together is here to speak to you today. The next slide here is just about the environment, and we know that we had several questions that came up through citizens. And just to explain again, through a rezoning process that is normally not at that time that there is detailed analysis that's done on the environment. I did want to show here, you see the red dot is the 180 Strawberry Plains. Behind it is College Woods. You see here that's depicted is RPA and RMA areas, Resource Protection Area and the Resource Management Area. They are not on the property per se. However, all properties and all development within the city must follow stormwater management practices, must have positive drainage, and we have our city engineer, Mr. Aaron Small here. If you have any questions about that, he's able to answer any questions. Next, I wanted to get briefly into development agreement, and normally this is not something that would come up during a rezoning. However, because the property is owned by the city and the development agreement between the applicant and the city discuss the purchase if this property is approved for rezoning, and at that time, 15 of the units would be for workforce housing. And I did want to clarify some things. The first thing here, I've said the 15 units and then the proposed purchase price. So the city is not directly paying the developer $100,000 per unit. The difference in the sale price and the fair market value is $1.5 million. And that difference as an in-kind payment to the city will reduce the price of the workforce units by $100,000 per unit. No taxpayer dollars are being paid to the developer. I think that's very important for everyone to know. The workforce units are required to contain the same quality of construction and finishes internally and externally. And then lastly, if the workforce units do not sell, once the final CO, which stands for Certificate of Occupancy, for the final unit of the development has been issued, any unsold remaining workforce units may be sold at market rate, and $100,000 of the sale price at closing must be paid to the city of Williamsburg. And the developer is required to pre-market the workforce units after closing. Staff recommendations. Again, as staff, especially as planning staff, our job is to look at the land use designation, the future land use designation, and when anyone comes in and requests a rezoning, we have to ensure that that rezoning request is in keeping with the future land use designation that was approved last year. So this particular application is in keeping with the zoning requirements and the comprehensive land use designation. The developer will provide required traffic improvements proposed by Land Tech and VDOT. Also, the property, is not within the RPA or RMA area, and the proposal is for 100 to 120 units. Right now, you see 120. It could be less than that based on when he gets out there and what will actually, what he will find there. And this is actually less than what is allowed here. And then the recreational amenities and the sidewalks and the interior school route, we believe is a positive thing. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but this is the staff recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin, and again, we appreciate the animations and the interest in the PowerPoint presentation. That's an improvement over some we've seen in the past. Are there questions for Ms. Griffin before we have the applicant's presentation?
I have a couple questions.
Mr. Tarley.
I agree with the chair. It was a very good presentation, very understandable. I appreciate that. With respect to the contract, is the purchase contract contingent upon this rezoning?
Yes, sir.
So then if the rezoning is not approved, then the contract is terminated?
Yes, sir.
And how how is the city to enforce this workforce housing requirement?
I will give that to Ms. Stilton.
All right, and so those will be recorded in the land record?
They'll be recorded at closing between the developer and the city.
And with respect to the traffic issue, recognize that the traffic report was limited to entrance to this.
Yes.
To your knowledge, has there ever been an assessment or recent assessment of the amount of traffic that is currently on Strawberry Plains Road?
Yeah, so from the presentation, actually in the traffic analysis, that first bar there gives the annual count that is done by VDOT. I don't have that in front of me. Again, I think the
All right,
traffic
I
engineer will talk
reviewed
about
that.
that.
What I was referring to, not the number,
Okay.
but whether the road is capable of handling what it has now versus, in addition to an extra 10% increase in traffic.
I don't know if Mr. Small can answer that question. Might want to come up here.
No, it is.
There it is.
Thank you, Mr. Tarley. I'm Aaron Small, city engineer. Strawberry Plains Road is kind of one of those interesting roads. It's been around for a long time, and prior to 199 being extended, it carried a lot more traffic than it's currently carrying. So really a small 10% increase is nominal over what it used to carry and its capacity. So it's going to be fine as far as the traffic is concerned. Now, that is a VDOT maintained and administered road, so we really, here at the city, we really don't have a lot of say in how it's managed.
Right, it's my understanding, with James City County on one side, city on the other, and then there's a certain portion, I believe it's College, towards
Actually, of Strawberry Plains Road, basically the right-of-way line, the edge of the right-of-way line on the city side is the city line. So
all along
the whole road of Strawberry Plains is within VDOT right-of-way.
Okay. I'm not putting you on the spot, but I
it's
think
okay.
you would agree that the amount of residences on Strawberry Plains Road is a lot different than when it was the main thoroughfare.
It is, yes.
Just as a matter of comparison, I drive that road every day, multiple times. I did a count from Craft 31 to the stoplight that there's over 30 ingresses and egresses on driveways, businesses, the residential neighborhood. So I guess the question would be, I would assume that there, not since that road has changed, has there been a determination, especially people who are backed up trying to drop their children off at school or trying to get to work, in Newtown or the city that are backed up on Strawberry Plains Road for a good distance in the mornings. I think that's where the concern would be, that whether the road can handle based upon its existing stuff, so.
Yeah, if you look at it, this would be all listed out in what VDOT's Highway Capacity Manual, and what you'll find is that a two-lane road has more than adequate for what that traffic is seeing. Where the issues that you're talking about are more about intersections and intersection operability, and there already is an issue at the John Tyler Lane, Strawberry Plains 199 intersection. And it's because of the proximity to the signal at Route 5. And so those issues, I know VDOT is working on those. And so, but that doesn't affect, the question about capacity of the two-lane roadway. It does have the capacity to handle it.
Thank you.
While he's here, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Help me understand the difference between a traffic analysis versus a traffic study.
Right. What they actually did was more a traffic analysis, and they analyzed what the volumes would be generated, and they looked at each of the main intersection, and their analysis was very conservatively done, such that what it is it loads all of the traffic out onto the main road at the maximum that is usually generated by this type of use of townhouses. And that tells us so many AM and PM left and right turns. And then that's coupled with the maximum peak hour traffic of Strawberry Plains Road based on the recent counts that we have for that road. And so what they did is they analyzed whether or not a right turn lane and or a left turn lane is needed. There's also additional warrants on, okay, would a signal be needed in that case? And in no case, it only requires the left turn lane, and that's mainly because of the through traffic volume on Strawberry Plains. It requires those turning vehicles to basically get out of the way so that they're not blocking cars that want to go straight.
And how does that differ from a traffic study?
A full traffic study is going to be much more comprehensive, such that they're going to look at all kinds of intersections all over the place. Outside, they would look at the Ironbound Road, Strawberry Plains. They would take it all the way down, may even include the 199 intersection. It's usually much more involved, but it's not really required in this case because of the traffic generation. It's based on the peak hour trips. And VDOT is the one that makes that determination.
Do people voluntarily do them?
Sometimes,
Okay.
but usually for much larger developments than proposed.
If I understand Ms. Griffin correctly, there was the possibility of the what's I guess being deemed the main road in and out right now of that road not being there, or not being the main road in and out, and it going through Strawberry Plains. And I may have misunderstood that because I see it connects through Strawberry Plains now. Is there an issue with the traffic for that neighborhood really going through the Strawberry Plains neighborhood? And
No, I think what generally I've found in traffic patterns and just looking at it, people are going to take the shortest route in and out because they've got to get to work on time, or they need to go to this place. Going down Irish Street and coming out one of the Strawberry Plains entrances is much further and circuitous than going straight out the main entrance. So I really don't expect a lot of through traffic through the neighborhood. I do expect that it's going to be one of those things where it's actually better to have that connection. One of the things proposed by the developer was to allow the residents of Strawberry Plains to participate in some of the recreational amenities. This will allow them to easily do that because you've made that connection with the neighborhood. And also the other thing that it helps is in case there's an emergency blockage. If you have a tree fall that blocks the main entrance, you don't have 120 townhomes blocked. They can go out the other direction. And so it also helps with fire. And a lot of emergency services. So it's really, it provides a very convenient connection. It's actually highly recommended by VDOT in neighborhood design is to provide interconnection.
okay. Those are the questions I have for.
Let me follow up on that. The original conceptual site plan that was published by the city or publicized on the website, the one that was published in August and the one in September, had a connection that was pedestrian and bicycle, and it had emergency access, right? But it did not have regular vehicular traffic going through.
Correct.
Okay, so we saw that, and then we saw the change that sort of popped up recently, and the traffic analysis that was done suggests that 30% of the traffic from these townhouses will be going through that subdivision, which has a city park in the middle of it, by the way. Where do we get data on what that's going to look like? What-
I
is there
don't
traffic?
expect to
Is there-
see 70%. I think that was a possibility, so they could look at road design of what that would look like. But I don't believe that's,
So the-
I
so
wouldn't
the traffic
expect,
ana-
I
so you-
wouldn't expect more than 10%.
So the traffic analysis is not accurate in that regard then?
Not in regards to saying that 30% of the traffic is going to go through the neighborhood.
And what is the data that supports that?
Hmm?
What data do you have that supports your
That's a matter of
Agreement.
engineering knowledge and experience.
so again, as Mr. Charlie said, not to put you on the spot, but since you're here, human nature is often on a busy street, if something's backed up, to take the first available opportunity to get where you're going. So somebody that's on, was that kind of going north on Strawberry Plains, if the traffic is backed up, or if there are people turning and that sort of thing, they're going to cut through that neighborhood, aren't they? I mean, isn't that
If
human
it's
nature?
worth it to turn around, because by the time they see that it's backed up,
No, I mean, if it's backed up to,
yeah,
because it
I
backs
don't
up,
expect
it
you'll
backs up.
see that much traffic backed up that far.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
I have a couple
Label?
of questions.
Yes.
With respect to mechanics, a number of our citizens have expressed concern about, of course, about the traffic backup, but the speed limit. I drive that particular run rather frequently, and the speed limit goes from 45 to 40 and then to 35 during the school zone. What is the mechanism by which a speed limit would be lowered to, say, 35 for the entire length of that part of Strawberry Plains?
What generally happens is you'd have to have VDOT request to have a speed study along that route.
Okay.
And what they would do is they actually look and see what vehicles are actually driving. And generally, speed limits, you want to be within such a range of the 85th percentile of the vehicles traveling along there. So that if 90% of the vehicles are driving at 40 miles an hour, they're not going to drop it below 40, because it actually creates a dangerous situation at that point, because then you're creating a speed trap, and that's not allowed.
And then my second question has to do with the proposed intersection, which is actually included in Chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan. Was there any anticipation that possibly there would be a light at that office park?
No.
Okay. And did anybody even look at that? It seems that it would be too close to the Ironbound intersection.
In addition to proximity, and I'd have to check the distances, but I believe it is about 800 feet that's required minimum between signals.
Okay.
That doesn't always happen, especially some of our, that's a fairly new requirement. However, in this particular case, I don't think the turning volumes and the gaps that are already there require that. Now, it's not always done. There may be, I'm not saying there's not going to be backups at the peak times where you've got to wait a little longer, but that's part of the way the analysis is done.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
So, I have heard a story about traffic going in and out of Berkeley Middle School during pickup and drop-off times, which I believe that there are very substantial backups in both directions. How would an issue like that be investigated and evaluated? Take the lead in doing it?
Because of both of those roads, Ironbound Road and Strawberry Plains, are VDOT maintained roads, that would be a VDOT issue. And so those would need to be brought up to them. What generally you find out is with schools, their opening and closing times, when the drop-off times are, don't usually correspond to the peak working hours of travel. And so sometimes that's just the way the peaks don't actually occur at the same time. Now, I don't know if that's the case for Berkeley Middle School, but that would be one of those you'd have to talk with VDOT. But they didn't indicate anything in their comments to that effect.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Griffin or Ms. Shelton?
I have a few more for Ms. Griffin, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So it's my understanding that of the 116 townhome units, 15 of them are going to be workforce housing. Is that correct?
They're actually looking at 120 units and 15 as workforce housing.
Okay. Was there discussion about more than 15? I know that we've got a workforce housing issue going on, and I'm wondering how we wound up at 15 instead of more.
I would have to defer that question to Ms. Shelton, who helped do the development agreement.
It was driven by the price
Okay.
and the fair market value of the property.
All right. It's also my understanding that these units will be available to anybody who lives or, who works in not just Williamsburg, but James City County or the Bruton District of York County. Because I feel like we're so much smaller than those two jurisdictions in the city of Williamsburg, is there the possibility of having it so that it's really geared towards the Williamsburg residents more so than the neighboring jurisdictions?
I think that would be something we would have to discuss, but I would defer to Ms.
So there's competing interests going on right now, which is there needs to be a large enough pool of people who are interested in the affordable housing units to have 15 units. That may or may not be present in the city of Williamsburg. So when we negotiated the contract, we ended up with the larger region, so James City, Williamsburg, or York, which covers teachers in the school system, firefighters in James City County and York County, police officers in James City and York County and the city of Williamsburg. So their income levels hit right in the spot where the workforce housing units. Now, it's not limited to public employees. It can be anyone who works in the city, but in the historic triangle as defined the way that you defined it. But it's a larger group, and that contract has been negotiated, so we wouldn't renegotiate those terms now.
So if it was to go forward, we wouldn't renegotiate it. Okay. It's my understanding that the restrictions will remain in place for 40 years,
Correct.
and that the workforce housing stays in place even when a unit is resold. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if there, in all of Williamsburg, James City County, and York County, there isn't enough demand for someone to buy the 15 units, what happens to the workforce housing units then?
So when the last certificate of occupancy is issued for the very last unit that's completed, if there are still workforce housing units that are not sold, those become market rate. Those can be sold for the $325,000 market rate price, but then the developer has to pay the city the $100,000. So if none of them sell, the selling price for the property will be $2.15 million. The affordable housing, the workforce housing, is an in-kind payment. If the in-kind payment is not possible, then we'll get the money from it, and that money can be used for affordable housing projects somewhere else in the city.
Okay. The possibility of opening it up to the city residents or the people who work in the public or private sector in the city of Williamsburg first, and then if there wasn't the demand, opening up to the other jurisdictions, I guess that would be a nice thing to do if we discovered that there wasn't enough demand in the city. But I understand that you said that it wouldn't be renegotiated.
So my understanding is that the developer intends to market that to city residents fairly hard. I can let the developer speak to that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are we finished with our questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Griffin, Shelton. We're going to, at this point, open the open forum and give my understanding is the applicant has a presentation for us, so we'll let that be next.
Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Carney. I'm an attorney with Patton, Warnham, Hatton, and Diamondstein, and I'm counsel to the applicant, Kale Development. John Kale is here on behalf of Kale Development. William Feltz is also here on behalf of Land Tech Resources to help answer any questions that you may have. My goal today for our presentation is to kind of fill in some of these gaps and respond further to some of the questions that you've already asked. But before I get started, I would like to thank Ms. Griffin and her team, Ms. Shelton and Mr. Small, and all of their work that they've done, because they've worked really hard with us to get this application to where it is, and especially Ms. Shelton to try to get these workforce housing supplemental covenants put in place that would be helpful to Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority. Tavia already highlighted a lot of the property's consistency with the comp plan, but it does bear merit to reiterate that this is an RM2 zoning that would be more appropriate for a residential-only development in this area. And since a rezoning is required to implement the higher residential density, proffers could be submitted to guarantee affordable workforce housing. Those supplemental covenants and restrictions are considered proffers in this rezoning. If the commission will please note the configuration of the subject parcel. You see the stub with the ingress-egress out to Strawberry Plains. That was left as a remainder of the parcel that was subdivided. You'll also see that there's a BMP down on the southern end of the property. That BMP is shared by this parcel, the adjacent already built residential, and is also used by the adjacent rear parcel. And then you'll see that Iris Street is already a stub that exists running onto the subject property. So that bears merit to say that this property was meant to be developed and meant to be developed in consistency with the adjacent properties under sort of a master plan. There's been a lot of questions about why are we here? How did this project come to fruition? And we all recognize there's a housing crisis, not just in Williamsburg, but in the Commonwealth and across the country. In 2020, JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission for the Commonwealth, did a comprehensive study across the Commonwealth about workforce and affordable housing. And you'll see that their housing cost burden among low-income Virginians has increased over the last decade to 63%. This affects Virginians who work in common occupations or who are paid relatively low salaries, like bus drivers at an average of $45,000 salary and social workers at an average of $51,000 salary. Households in Hampton Roads are more likely to be cost burdened than in any other region. JLARC's study came out with a few recommendations, and a few of those are actually addressed by Williamsburg in your comp plan and your goals and initiatives. One of the recommendations was to address the affordable housing shortage requires construction of new affordable housing, but local zoning ordinances can be a substantial barrier. Very few localities zone more than 50% of their multifamily housing, which is the housing most needed in Virginia. Requiring proffered rezonings to allow multifamily housing construction is recommended by JLARC to allow improvements to the locality that will be driven by the development, like the traffic improvements we're going to just discuss in a minute. In addition to legislative and executive actions, the study recommends a policy action that the General Assembly could give additional localities the authority to require developers to set aside a portion of units to rent or sell below market value or pay a fee to the locality. So we fast forward 1 year from there, and the city adopts its 2021-2022 goals, initiatives, and outcomes. That was a study that you all did over a course of 9 months. Approximately 1,600 households, or 1/3 of all city households in Williamsburg, are reported as being cost burdened. If you remove what we would consider as a likely student, well over 50% of households have incomes below the regional median family income, showing that the overall city contains a higher percentage of lower income households than the surrounding communities. The city needs 1,247 affordable housing units across all 5 of the income levels, with the number of units rising each year. And that's important that it crosses all 5 income levels, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute when we talk about the workforce housing criteria. In the city's recommendations, it was included inclusionary zoning, which is a zoning policy that encourages or requires, through density or height bonuses, the inclusion of affordable housing units in a market rate development. That is what Landmark Village is meant to do. Inclusionary zoning is the most prevalent affordable housing strategy. Also included is soft density. This tool eliminates single-family only zoning categories and adds a minimum density to certain types of developments. Now, specifically to Landmark Village. This idea came to fruition by Kale Development at the grand opening of Holly Hill Townhomes. Many Williamsburg police officers and other first responders attended that grand opening. But because that property is subject to an ARB, the prices of construction were higher, and therefore the outsell prices to consumers are higher. And thus, the Landmark Village idea arose to come up with a plan for townhomes that would enable affordable workforce housing. You've heard that it's going to be up to 120 townhomes in the neighborhood with varying styles and square footage. It is a coastal colonial architecture design with many amenities that Tevye has also already touched on. 15 of those units will be dedicated, and they are deed restricted, and they are subject to the supplemental restrictive covenants. Ms. Shelton has already touched on a lot of the criteria, but there was a question along this process about the $60,000 cap. That $60,000 cap is allowed to increase as the base annual household income increases in equivalent with purchasing power as inflation rates arise. And so the $60,000 will in fact increase as criteria as those rates arise. And it's also important to note that that criteria was picked up from Williamsburg Housing and Redevelopment Authority, as Ms. Shelton has already explained. In terms of the sale, we did, in order to meet the market demands, increase that geographic area beyond the city. But the developer is committed to attempt to pre-sell these workforce housing units as soon as we put the close on the acquisition of the land. And the developer intends to work with the City of Williamsburg, with Colonial Williamsburg, the College of William and Mary, to really target city residents to come to Landmark Village. This is just a conceptual rendering of the colonial architectural style. It's coastal actual architectural style that we intend to use throughout the development. It's also important to note that the 15 workforce housing units will be dispersed throughout the development. They won't be concentrated in a single area. Another question has arisen about what is the availability of financing for a consumer who wants to finance workforce housing units? Can they get a traditional mortgage? We have talked to a traditional mortgage company who put this out as a concept to his appraisers and to his lending cohorts, and they have said that they would in fact finance these types of consumers and buyers. Also, Virginia Housing, which formerly used to be VHDA, has specific loan programs that are targeted to workforce housing units and workforce housing borrowers who may not otherwise qualify under a commercial or institutional loan. And they also have other types of assistance to help upfront closing costs that would allow the home buyer to finance in a second mortgage those upfront closing costs and spread them out over the term of the loan and amortize them versus paying them upfront. Virginia law requires Virginia Housing to establish mortgage interest rates that are as low as possible. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the traffic considerations. Commissioner Granger, you asked about the different types of traffic studies. So VDOT has a couple of different ways that they analyze a traffic study. One is the full-blown traffic impact analysis for large-scale projects like Mr. Small talked about. There's another analysis type that talks about if a locality requires a specific type of analysis as part of rezoning or development, then VDOT will review that. Then VDOT also has what they consider a low-volume road submission. Low-volume road is defined as a proposal in which the site-generated trips being distributed to the receiving highway do not exceed the daily traffic volume that the highway currently presents. We are at 9% as to what this development will generate. 9,600 is the current total. So we are not going to exceed what we put onto this highway onto Strawberry Plains, and therefore under VDOT standards, this would be considered a low road volume submission. The calculations that were done consider VDOT's 2021 traffic counts. They also take into account the ITE Trip Generation Manual 10th edition. It's important to note that we did take into account the traffic that's being generated by Newtown Professional Center and Stensland's Dental Studio. We didn't just factor in hours into those totals. The analysis and the findings came back that the existing entrance will require the installation of a left-hand turn lane. The existing left-hand turn lane will essentially be extended 300 feet down Strawberry Plains. The existing right-hand radius between 150 and 195 Strawberry Plains will be upgraded. The proposed work will improve that existing entrance to the development as it currently sits. The sidewalk to the Berkeley Middle School will be extended. VDOT reviewed the analysis by Land Tech and did submit a letter back approving the analysis and also agreeing with the recommendations related to the development plan and the traffic warrants. Chairman Boswell, you asked about the Irish Street connection. In the initial submission, it did not include that. And then as the conceptual plan was refined, and you'll see that some of the street configurations changed from the first plan, and in talking with staff, it was determined that VDOT does like to minimize, and Mr. Tarley, you hit on this, does like to minimize the number of access points on the direct highway. So to minimize another entrance coming out, we would have some traffic flow through Irish Street. Also, the thought was that the residents over there would like to use the amenities, and we don't want to put them onto Strawberry Plains to come into the subject property to access those amenities. So that was the addition of Irish Street. Stormwater considerations, stormwater drainage will be handled by the existing BMP that is on the southern portion of the property. That existing BMP, as I mentioned earlier, was constructed with the master plan idea of future development on the subject site. It is sized and it is constructed to handle impervious cover drainage that will be generated by this development. Prior to site plan approval, just like any other site plan, that will be reanalyzed to ensure that the BMP can handle both quantity and quality that is required and that it will function properly. And as I wrap up, just a few things about the impacts of Landmark Village. The purchase price is $650,000. That will be paid at closing. The value to the city for their workforce housing units is $1.5 million. That's the $100,000 reduction in the fair market value for 15 of the workforce housing units. The total investment by the developer is estimated to be $6 million for site work and $35 million for construction improvements, which will generate an increased real estate tax to the city of $217,000 annually. And the labor impact, Kale Development does pride itself on local contractors and subcontractors being contracted for the work. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
I have a question about the request to rezone to RM2. Did you consider, and why did you dismiss the idea of requesting a rezoning to RM1 at a lower density?
To make the project financially work, RM2 is the way to go because we wanted to ensure that the developer was paying the fair market value to the city for what the property is worth, and that's the density we needed to generate that.
My understanding is that with the affordable housing units, the 15 of the 120, they will need to be owner occupied. The other units, will there be an HOA, and what sort of restrictions will be there in regards to rentals and occupancy?
Sure. So there will be an HOA because this is a townhome community with common areas. So notice I've been mentioning a supplemental restrictive covenant because that is the second restrictive covenant that will be recorded. The first one will be your standard HOA declaration. At this time, we are not planning for a prohibition on rentals of those other units. And that's, again, a financing decision that we need to be able to finance the property and get institutional financing for the construction, but also on the out sales. However, this is not a student housing project. Kale Development has done student housing projects in various other locations, and this quality of product is much higher than what they do on a student housing project.
Mr. Chairman, I actually have another question. The HOA fee question reminded me. Has the cost of the HOA fees been factored into the affordability calculation for the affordable housing units?
They have. We don't have a finite, a definitive number right now, but we've got pro forma estimates, so that has been factored into the ability for those consumers and borrowers to finance.
Okay, and that includes, your HOA fees are going to include the maintenance of the private roads?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Carley?
Thank you, Ms. Carney. Thank you for the presentation, and, I want to note as well that for Cal Development, it takes a lot of resources just to get to this point. There's a lot of time and financial resources that have been put in there, and I appreciate the willingness to address one of the issues that the city has placed high on the agenda, which is workforce housing. Having said that, and you touched upon it a little bit, and I think you've heard the discussion, and you probably have seen some of the concerns from the citizens with respect to traffic, and it's less to do with the left turn lane or the deceleration right turn lane. It's about the existing condition of Strawberry Plains Road and the current amount of traffic and backups, lack of sidewalks. A person who buys at Landmark Village can't walk safely to Craft 31 for dinner. And I know Cal Development didn't cause that issue, but it's an issue that's being thrown in there. And so we heard this discussion of assessments, traffic studies, that as it relates to the intersections on all sides, the school traffic. What is the developer's thought on commissioning a much broader traffic analysis of Strawberry Plains Road?
At this point, Mr. Tarley, you're right. A lot of investment has gone into this already. Because VDOT only requires that low-volume road submission, which requires just the study of the entrance, it does not require the study of the intersections. That's what the developer has done because, again, as Mr. Small indicated, if there are going to be additional improvements, that's a VDOT project, not really a Cal Development project that we could have any control over.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carney.
Thank you.
Does anybody have questions for any of the other applicants' representatives before we move on to the public comment section? Okay. Oh, yes. Yes,
I
Ms.
do
Leibel.
have one more question for Mr. Small. Specifically talking about not being able to cross, Mr. Tarley's comment about not being able to cross the street and get over to Craft 31 if you wanted to increase the walkability of the area. With respect to crosswalks, are those also governed by VDOT? So the triggered light crosswalks that we see on Jamestown Road and Richmond Road, would those be a possibility, or would VDOT have to decide they were necessary?
They would have to go through the VDOT process for the warrants for them. And typically, I want to say for the lighted crosswalks, unless they're paid for by a private entity, most of the ones you see in the city are actually paid for by the College of William and Mary. The city hasn't actually paid for any of those. And most of the crosswalks that you see, I believe they require about 200 pedestrians an hour during the peak. And that would be very difficult to see that along that route. I would like to add about being able to walk down the road. There is a project planned along Strawberry Plains Road, which is our College Woods Circuit Phase 2 multi-use trail, which will extend all across the frontage of this project, all the way down to beyond John Tyler Lane.
It's fair to say, though, that there isn't any timeline on that, isn't it?
We actually already received over $500,000 in funding, initial funding, and we're looking to go after start the design phase on that. So we're probably looking at about 3 to 5 years.
Since you followed up, I wanted to follow up with Mr. Small. Because we talked about, I know these are VDOT, right? So, but when we talk about speed, we say, okay, well, people are going 40, but you cross, as you're going towards Williamsburg Crossing, and you go over onto John Tyler Lane, it's the same road, and it's 25. And people go 25 because that's the speed limit. And it's 40 over here. People don't walk on Strawberry Plains, but they don't walk on Strawberry Plains because it's not safe to walk. So, one drives the other, it seems. And I realize it's not your job, and it's VDOT. And I had thought that there was going to be a VDOT representative here today, so you get his questions.
Yes, I understand.
But those would be the things that I would want to know is, do those change behavior? Not speed trap, not trying to create a speed trap.
Generally, what happens when you do see multiple entrances and the traffic starts to increase, you do see traffic slow down because people are, don't want to get too close to the car in front of them. Traveling too fast becomes a problem, and so the overall speed limits do lower. The more entrances there are, the lower the slower speed people go as well. I mean, you compare Monticello Avenue in the city section coming through the woods, and then all of a sudden you're coming into the travel area or the Midtown Rose section, and so it just feels like I need to drive slower because somebody's going to step out. You're in a much more urbanized environment. You somewhat have that in some areas of Strawberry Plains, but it does still look more like a rural road. And so people are comfortable traveling at those speeds. And that's really why I think some of those speed limits are still much higher.
Okay, are we good to move to the public comments? Okay. Has everyone had the opportunity to fill out one of these yellow speaker cards? They're available in the foyer. We have quite a few. This is the process. If you have not, please go ahead and fill it out and hand it to the clerk. Everybody gets an opportunity to speak. Please address your comments to me. This is an opportunity for you to tell us what you think. This is not a conversation between us and you, so we will be paying very close attention to what you say, but we will not be commenting back and forth. Our policy is for everyone to have 5 minutes. Ms. Clerk, you have the control of the timer. There is a timer on the podium, and we ask that you direct your attention to that while you're speaking to us, and please be as specific as you can. We've had folks who come and say, well, I don't like it. Please tell us why. Be as specific as you can in your comments, because this is such a very important part of this process. So I'm going to go in order of that I have the cards here, which I believe is the order that the clerk had them. Debbie Burcham, please. Now, Ms. Clerk, do you need the card? Do you need them to say their names and all before, even though we have the cards? Okay. If you also would state your name and your address for the clerk to get in the minutes.
Hi, my name is Debbie Burcham, and I live at 105 Holland Drive in the Strawberry Plains subdivision. I am here today because I want to instruct you not to approve this zoning change. I do not believe the city nor its residents will benefit from this rezoning of this land. I keep hearing about all this affordable housing, and I know that's a big GIO thing. But this land is being sold at a considerable discount for the opportunity to have only 15 of the proposed 120 units dedicated towards workforce housing. If the city truly wants to provide affordable housing for 15 families, it would keep the zoning as it is and build entry-level homes, which are similar to those in the Strawberry Plains subdivision, as it was originally intended, because that other portion of land was supposed to be just like the Strawberry Plains subdivision when the city purchased all of that and that development was proposed. I'm not opposed to that property being developed. It just needs to be according to the current zoning. This proposed development is out of context with the character of our neighborhood, and it undermines the quality of life for every resident in Strawberry Plains and the surrounding areas. It will exponentially increase traffic around Strawberry Plains Park. Nobody seems to be talking about that. This proposed road entrance to this place will run on Watson Drive and Irish Street. And that is an area in our subdivision where people walk their dogs, kids are out riding their bikes and playing. There's going to be so much traffic from these townhomes, because you can say what you want about people are going to use the main entrance. I can tell you right now, I see people cut through our neighborhood to avoid the traffic that's backed up on Strawberry Plains Road so that they can get over to 199 and get over to the school and avoid. So there's already a problem there. It's just going to be exacerbated. And it's going to cause that section of our neighborhood to no longer be a safe place for kids to ride bikes or people to be out walking their dogs or playing in the park. and it's going to cause even more traffic congestion on Strawberry Plains Road. You can tell me all day long how great things look on paper. It doesn't work that way in the real world. That's not what actually goes on there. You pull in to our neighborhood and then turn around and try to go out. You see how long you sit there trying to get out on Strawberry Plains Road, because it's a long time. I've been in that neighborhood since it was developed. We were one of the last houses built in there. It's been a huge change in what's going on, and you're talking about adding 120 families to that area. You're going to reduce our property values because we're going to be going from single-family area now to this multifamily area. You're talking about all the environmental issues involved in the watershed and Lake Matoka. Nobody seems to be talking about all of that. And then we're not discussing the future resources of the city, the taxes that we're going to end up having to pay even more of, because you're talking about our resources with school, fire department, police department. We ain't going to be able to increase all of those resources without having to pay more taxes. It's not fair to us to say, we're going to find this one little spot here, and then that becomes my next question. If this is housing that is going to be available to applicants from people working in Williamsburg, James City County, York County, why does it have to be this property? Why does the city of Williamsburg, and specifically the residents of Strawberry Plains subdivision, have to bear the burden for what this developer wants to do? And I'll point out, it was mentioned, this land was sold to the city for $1.1 million in 1988. And now it's being sold without bids from other interested parties for $650,000, and we're talking about land that's assessed at $2.2 million. Personally, I find that quite interesting that Mr. Kale applied to be on the EDA, and while he's in this public position, he managed to negotiate such a deal with the city manager for this real estate. Or that he applied to be on the planning commission, and now that he's on the planning commission, all of a sudden it comes up for rezoning. These are all the kinds of things that make me think about backdoor deals that I don't like. So I will close with, so for the opportunity to maybe, possibly help 15 families, the city of Williamsburg taxpayers will be losing money on a valuable asset and will be getting more traffic and environmental problems in exchange. This is not acceptable. City residents do not want nor need high-density housing. We must take the appropriate steps to ensure that Williamsburg does not lose its special character. We are obligated to develop wisely and responsibly and attempt to preserve what we love about Williamsburg, and that does not include rezoning this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bertram, for being here today. Go, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission today. My name is Emily Argo. I am the owner of 105 Watson Drive in Strawberry Plains. I have lived there for almost 4 years now, and I would like to express my opposition to the rezoning of this property. I want to touch on two things, workforce housing as well as traffic concerns. So I'll start with workforce housing. I purchased my home. I was in the exact income bracket that you were looking for, working 2 jobs, and I purchased my home for $206,000 with the assistance of a down payment assistance grant. That is the only way for me to possibly purchase a home. And I was incredibly grateful that the Strawberry Plains neighborhood had homes that were smaller, entry-level homes. And even though I was not one of the first purchasers in that property, in that development, as some of my neighbors were, I was still afforded the opportunity to buy an affordable home here in Williamsburg with some assistance. And unfortunately, the $325,000 sub $100K puts the purchase price at $225,000. I'm sorry, but that's just not realistic, and you are only talking about 15 properties out of 120, and then once those, if they're not sold at that workforce housing rate, they then become $325,000 properties. They are completely out of reach for anyone in this income bracket that you were searching for. So unfortunately, I do not find that the approach to making these appropriate workforce housing is manageable or realistic, or would really make a long-term value to the city of Williamsburg to increase our affordable housing options here. So I wanted to speak to my experience, and as well as reiterate some of the previous commenters' points that developing something similar to what we currently have in Strawberry Plains, I would not necessarily be opposed to. I think that would be great. I think we have a wonderful thing in our neighborhood where there are affordable homes. But when I was searching for homes, townhomes were absolutely not something I looked for because they were completely unaffordable. It was these smaller single-family homes that made it possible for me to buy a house in the city of Williamsburg with some minor assistance, but it still wasn't $225,000 or more. I also want to address the traffic concerns because I live on Watson Drive. That is going to be one of the streets. I'm the second house in. That is going to be where people line up to go in and out. And it was not assessed. And I understand that the certain requirements by VDOT for the assessment and the analysis were met, but unfortunately that's missing what's actually going to happen to us who live in Strawberry Plains neighborhood and are going to be impacted by this traffic. There's also a bus stop on the corner of Watson Drive, just as you come into the neighborhood. And you're gonna have people coming through very quickly. There are 2 bus stops or so in our neighborhood on these corners that are going to be impacted by this increase in traffic. And frankly, we're just not equipped to handle that. I can sometimes barely get out of my own driveway in the morning, waiting for people to try and turn on Strawberry Plains Road. And so I feel like there are a lot of things that were missed, particularly with this traffic analysis. While I can appreciate that the proposal is for 100 to 120 homes, rather than the 187 that could be fit there, the fact that the analyses don't seem to take into account the potential for a much larger scale development, I think is a missed opportunity, frankly, in really assessing what that impact could look like, because as has been mentioned, this is a proposal. That could always change once rezoning takes place, and that to me is incredibly concerning for a number of reasons. But I want to reiterate that I am indeed opposed to rezoning this to a multifamily property, and I do not think it addresses our workforce housing concerns here in the city of Williamsburg, and that the traffic concerns are not being adequately addressed by the current analyses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Argo. Appreciate you being here today. This is next. Beth Chambers.
Hello, Mr. Roswell. I'm with Planning Commission. Okay, I also share the hope that you do not vote for this rezoning. Sorry, I know a lot of you worked really hard, and I appreciate the staff's work.
If you would
Oh, sorry.
state your name and address for the clerk. Yeah.
Beth Chambers. I'm nervous. Sorry.
Don't be nervous.
Beth H. Chambers, 501 Newport Avenue in Williamsburg.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't.
Take a deep breath. You're fine.
Okay, thanks.
You're fine.
I know they worked really hard, and I appreciate that, but I'm actually kind of appalled at the lack of environmental analysis. But first, I just want to say one thing about the workforce housing. I think you guys really should deal with this as a planning commission and plan ahead, and not as a reactive thing to this one contract that, yeah, looks a little weirdly sketchy because of how it just sounds that way a little bit to me. I'm sure it's all up and up, but I think you should think ahead as a planning commission plans ahead. So think about a bigger map or other options. I don't see why it has to be tied up into this one property. That's all I have to say about that. It seems like there's other ways you can deal with this in a bigger and a better way, even better. And I want to just say the environmental analysis on this is lacking. Are there any environmental concerns? Nobody even asked a question. I think you guys should ask questions about the environmental concerns, because just because there's a BMP, which those really don't work that well. I mean, I know people, I'm married to someone who actually studies that, and they don't work that well for water quality control. There's no concern about anything, and there's no mention of biological concern. This is connected to College Woods. I actually don't even want any development here, and I'm sorry that I did not comment on the bigger plan, because I want low development. Water quality is totally related to how much forest you have. And you're taking a forest that's older than all of us. It's older than all of us, and in one bit you're closing it, and yes, you're gonna get maybe some nice teachers and firefighters, yay, I love them, but living there, but they're living in a impervious surface. Do you know there's endangered plants really close? There's an endangered orchid in College Woods. Nobody asked about that. I'm kind of irked that nobody asked. Like, you guys should ask. Do you need a biologist? I mean, I don't really want to do this, but you need I don't understand why that wasn't even brought up. They haven't mentioned it, nobody, they went to the level of HOA fees applying to your cost analysis, but you didn't even mention that there's this forest with trees that are older than us, and we are one little generation, and I'm running out of time. But I want to read for you from the Green Williamsburg on the City of Williamsburg website. It says, "The City of Williamsburg is committed to ensuring the quality and safety of its natural and built environment, and we understand the importance of our responsibility to future generations. We will continuously improve environmental practices and strive to become a model of environmental stewardship." This project is not it, and you haven't shown it. And I know you're concerned about traffic. I am too. I drive it. It's bad. Berkeley Middle School's bad. It's there, but really want to just say, hey, think about the ecological things. We're going to be dead and gone. Hopefully this forest will still be there.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Bad, was it? Nothing to be nervous about? The Stenslands, I guess we have two on one card. Are you gonna speak separately, or is Mr. Zhang gonna speak for you? Okay, your choice. Your choice.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lynn Ann Stensland, and our business address is 195 Strawberry Plains, and I'm assuming that's what you're wanting for the record of this purpose, which is, of course, located directly next to the proposed Landmark Village. The proposed Landmark Village is the largest development effort along Strawberry Plains in recent memory. The proposed 100 to 120 dwelling units projected will create explosive density that must be carefully mitigated by the developer or the city in order to combat adverse effects to the neighboring subdivision and surrounding local businesses. Our primary concerns involve traffic, student safety, and the lack of consideration for neighboring businesses. We urge the Planning Commission to delay any vote until we are able to have informed discussions regarding these issues. So first, I'd like to address the lack of consideration for neighboring businesses. I am disappointed that the developer did not discuss this with us or ask for our input. At the June City Council meeting, the Vice Mayor asked Mr. Kale when he would reach out to the neighboring businesses, and Mr. Kale said he would do so as soon as he was under contract. After visiting dozens of nearby businesses and Strawberry Plains residents, I learned that only a few had even heard of this proposed development, and none realized what a big impact it would have on this road. Given zero outreach by the developer to surrounding local businesses and neighbors, and again, given the sheer magnitude of this development, the Planning Commission should delay any vote until the developer provides conceptual renderings on VDOT's comments to show the surrounding neighbors for feedback and consultation, such as the left turn lane that was mentioned and any additional necessary curb and road improvements. Next, I'd like to discuss the traffic problem. The current traffic analysis is insufficient and does not provide any information on school traffic. Recent large-scale development projects such as Midtown Row produced lengthy and detailed traffic analyses. The Planning Commission ought to ensure that the developer provides a much more detailed traffic report accounting for school traffic before the Planning Commission decides on its recommendation to City Council, such as the traffic study that the city engineer just mentioned. Anyone who drives on this road during school hours knows how backed up it can be. Sometimes the traffic extends from Ironbound Road all the way to John Tyler. This traffic backup makes it difficult for people to access our businesses as well as other businesses along Strawberry Plains. The backup at Berkeley also causes problems for those not going to Berkeley and they just want to get by. Daily, I watch people illegally drive around the backed up school traffic in order to make a right onto Ironbound Road from Strawberry Plains. I also watch people use the Buck Trout parking lot to bypass Berkeley traffic for those coming from Ironbound turning right onto Strawberry Plains. I cannot imagine that simply adding a left turn lane, as VDOT is recommending, will solve this problem, especially since the problem exists now, before the development has even been built, which will no doubt be made much worse by adding this large development. Adding a left turn lane will also do nothing to help the residents of Strawberry Plains who already have a hard time getting out of their neighborhood, going to work in the morning as they battle with school traffic, which, by the way, Berkeley starts at 8:05. So comment on that from that earlier. So it is at the work time. We have experienced and have heard reports from neighboring businesses and residents about the near misses, cars narrowly missing, hitting a kid walking across the road on the way to school. And I know Mr. Tarley had mentioned that it would be difficult for people to walk from this development to Craft 31 safely. Well, that difficulty exists for these kids every single day right now trying to walk across, because those who live within a mile of the school are walking to school. So the narrow, substandard Strawberry Plains Road creates dangerous walking conditions for these children. Therefore, the developer and the Planning Commission should delay any vote until a more robust discussion with James City County and VDOT can be had before this landmark village is approved. VDOT, in its comments dated October 14th, 2022, suggested that the developer address its comments prior to approval, and certainly ought to be considered before the Planning Commission renders a recommendation to the City Council one way or another. One final note: surrounding businesses, such as our business, pays taxes and generates positive economic benefit to the city. The proposed landmark village does not even have an economic impact analysis, which should be required before any decision is made. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you will consider our comments when making your decision.
Thank you, Ms. Stensland. Steve Stensland.
I'm Steve Stensland. I'm owner of the dental practice Stensland Dental Studio, which is right where the development's going to be turning in. And I'm not going to spend 5 minutes because I know everybody's got a lot to talk about. She said most of everything I wanted to say. I just wanted to mention the impact to my business. I think anybody driving in would agree that you worry about these kids. I'm watching them walk across the sidewalk. I'm watching patients turn into my practice, and they have to pause sometimes because they're not sure if the child's going to go or stay. There's always a line of cars. We're always having a hard time. People have to wave us in. A left turn lane's not going to just cut it, especially when you have that many people. I'm not opposed to a sound plan, and I think anybody that is professional likes to have a good sound plan that makes sense for affordable housing instead of something that seems rushed. I think there's a lot of people, and you'll see a recurring theme going on, that there just is not a good traffic plan right now, and I'd really like to hear what VDOT would say with a more comprehensive study that we've been talking about. So those are the main things. And the last thing, I would also like to know, because I was very frustrated when I didn't get any reach out. Nobody reached out to me about this plan, considering that it is right where we turn in to go to work. I don't know what the construction impact would have on my practice, on my business, on my revenue. That's going to be, I'm assuming, a lot of tree clearing, a lot of things on very narrow roads coming to and from and through Strawberry Plains. I don't know how that's going to impact people I see. And so I came to Williamsburg a few years ago. I moved from James City County. I'd like to think I generate some good tax revenue for you guys. I hope my statement is considered, but I'm also with my wife. We don't really like the way the plan is structured, and would hope some much better consideration would be considered with regards especially to traffic. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next card is Mary Major.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mary Major. I live at 7 Cole Lane, which is just off of, it's that little horseshoe road right at John Tyler Lane, just up from Walsingham Academy. It seems like I'm a little bit distant from where this proposed development is, but I will tell you that the traffic issues around 199, Route 5, Strawberry Plains Road, John Tyler Lane, and now the VDOT proposed fix for the 199 Jamestown Road study that's been done to see how we're going to mitigate all of this new proposed traffic is a major concern for a lot of us that are not only residents around John Tyler Lane and these neighborhoods, but this issue of increased traffic for Strawberry Plains Road impacts all of us. There are many mornings where we sit backed up way past the Goose Pond trying to just get down Strawberry Plains, trying to get out of the neighborhood to get onto a road to go where we need to go. To include an additional 120 some cars on a road that Our engineer is defined as still strictly a rural road when it is clearly transitioned into a robust neighborhood commercial area. The Planning Commission, City Council, and VDOT must work better together to figure out how this now country road has transferred and has now become a very important residential neighborhood road, not only for the folks at Strawberry Plains, but for the folks on either end of that. I've sat in the traffic coming up Monticello Avenue waiting to make a turn and had to sit through 4 lights at the Berkeley Middle School, not even when they're in school, to be able to make the turn onto Strawberry Plains Road. The congestion around this area must be addressed before any potential more development should even be contemplated. And just as a side note, with regard to the environmental decisions and evaluations, I will tell you, when I moved to this city 20 years ago and bought my old house on Cole Lane, I had 7 very decrepit, large trees around my house. The city required that I get an arborist. It cost me $15,000 to have appropriate studies done for those trees to be cut down that were leaning towards my house because of the importance of the Chesapeake Bay watershed and what was I going to do to replace those trees. And now I'm looking at an aerial photograph of 13 acres of woods, and how many trees is the developer going to replace to address the water quality for the Chesapeake Bay watershed that I had to spend $15,000 for 20 years ago to take down old decrepit trees on my property to protect my house? I pose that as a question because this process has not gone through sufficient evaluation either for traffic considerations, workforce housing, long-term impacts for traffic. I know VDOT only requires an event analysis of a small little niche that they look at, but this impacts neighborhoods far and away, much further away from this particular little road with a left-hand turn. And as a planning commission, I implore you, I beg you to plan. Look at the big picture of what this means to the rest of the residents that live not just within this immediate area, but will be impacted by this development for many, many miles away from here. And we can do better. And I urge you to not approve this project in this time until much more evaluation and the traffic issues are thoroughly addressed. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you listening to my comments this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Murphy.
Hi, I'm Helen Murphy. I live at 121 Berkeley Lane. So I come here as a Williamsburg resident and also as a biologist working at William & Mary. So I'm new to the Planning Commission. I come here today assuming that you serve to make decisions in the best interest of the entire Williamsburg community, and you have to weigh the costs and benefits of all the decisions you're asked to make. So I come here today assuming that you have everyone's best interests at heart, and so I want to share with you how I see the cost-benefit analysis of the proposal, because my analysis differs quite a bit from what I saw in the staff report. And so mostly what I want to do is explain to you the College Woods and how we see it at William & Mary. So the College Woods is this incredible place. It's really special. I think you know that on any given day, if you were to walk into the woods, you would see our local residents, our local citizens, students doing research. All of that's true, but I want to tell you a little bit more. So as a biologist, what we would say is that it's a mature coastal plain forest. It has trees that are over 160 years old, as some of my fellow residents have mentioned. It's cut throughout by deep ravines that drain into Lake Matoka, which is the oldest man-made lake in all of Virginia. And it's also very pristine right now. Okay, because of the underlying rock deposits that make their way to the surface in these ravines, we actually have pockets of what's called calcareous dry forest community. Okay, that sounds crazy. Why should you care about that? These are very, very rare communities. They are the highest ranked in terms of rarity, both globally and within our state. So they're incredibly rare. And we have them in the ravines that you may know if you've gone walking through the woods. According to the Virginia Department of Conservation and Resources, I want to explain a little. Here's a quote. In Virginia, occurrences of this type of community are small and highly localized in two environmental situations. The first, I'll read because it's our situation, in steep, convex, south-facing slopes of dissected ravine systems and river-fronting bluffs in the intercoastal plain. Later on, it explains the majority of documented stands are on the peninsula near Williamsburg. So that's us. So that's what we have in the College Woods. It's really beautiful in there. We have, as my colleague Beth mentioned, small world begonias, which are threatened federally. They make the news in Vermont when they actually bloom. That's how exciting they are to nerdy botanists like us. And the College Woods is so special to us that in 1994, when developers wanted to buy it and the state wanted to sell it, the Board of Visitors passed a resolution to make it a legally protected natural preserve. That means if the college wants to transfer the land or if it wants to sell it, it needs 2/3 vote of the Board of Visitors, and it needs to be passed by the General Assembly. So that's what it means to us. We have studies in there that have been going on for 45 years. And in ecological sense, it's impossible to ever get that data again. There's no areas left where we can actually do that. So I think that not only William and Mary should care about that as a resource, I think that the Williamsburg community and the Planning Commission should see that as something really special and something that we should protect. So what does that have to do with this development? So this development is basically in an area where the storm discharge is going to go into one of the remaining ravines that has that special habitat. The other area in the College Woods that had it has already been destroyed by previous development, so that's over by 199. My colleague Jim is going to actually explain that to you. It's something that we affectionately call now the Grand Canyon. We know that the best management practices that are required by the state are not enough to protect this habitat. We know that it causes sedimentation. We know that it destroys habitat for many different organisms. We lost 40 to 50 rare species in the forest from that previous development. So to us, this is like a 5-alarm fire, right, when we hear about this development happening. Let's see, what else do I want to say here? So I hope you can see that this parcel isn't next to a sort of vacant lot owned by William and Mary, which is how it was explained in the staff report. Also, the report says that it is not in a resource protection area. We don't actually know that that's true. You should be doing a site-specific study on the ground to make sure that, in fact, this land is not affected by the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance. And so as a resident, I implore you to require an RPA analysis on-site study before you actually move ahead with any rezoning. I also request just an environmental impact study on this area because it is so special and because it is so rare. So to me, that is the cost of the development. And I understand that you have to think about cost and benefits. And so when I think about the benefits, I find them mixed. So I'm super supportive of workforce housing. I should say my mother was a teacher. I grew up in New York City in rent-controlled housing. So I have personally benefited from it. But as you heard today, we're not sure that that's actually going to be the case, that we're going to lose a lot of the workforce housing anyway because people won't be able to afford it. So I'll stop and I'll ask you to really consider the costs of what you're going to be rezoning.
Ms. Fairbanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Sabrina Fairbanks. I reside at 119 Berkeley Lane in the Walnut Hills subdivision. I first personally became interested in this project because a family member was one of the citizens who sold this property to the city for $1.1 million. And when we heard that it was being sold for $650,000, we were concerned. And I personally am a resident that travels Strawberry Plains Road several times a day, so I am in this traffic along with the residents, WADA buses, school buses. It's on 2 school bus routes. I don't know if that's come out in this. So there's just so much traffic. What I want to suggest is that this is a classic case of spot zoning, where you're being asked to change single-family residency to accommodate high density for, we've got to ask, what reason? You're being asked to change this without necessary safeguards, which are typically asked of developers. And I would argue, Mr. Kale's representative said that this is not a large-scale development. There's a development that's just about to be built in our area that is was proposed 126 units. If this has 120 units, let me tell you, as a comparison, that development was required to have a traffic study, an environmental impact study, a school impact study, a financial impact study, and I would suggest that this one, being next to a school, needs to have a public safety study. So I think it is a large development, no matter what they're saying. And in terms of the traffic, my kids hadn't been at Berkeley Middle for some years, so I went and sat on October 31st, on Halloween. I went and sat next to the school and just to see what I wanted to see. From 2:50 p.m. to 3:02, 12 minutes, 51 cars in one direction coming from Route 5. The school buses could not get out. There were near misses when I could tell out of frustration the school buses were trying to get out. It didn't seem to me, I didn't have a radar gun, but it didn't seem to me people were slowing down at the school zone. And so traffic is an issue. Financially, the Kale Development's representative says they were going to give or pay $217,000, I believe she said, in property taxes. The same area, the same similar development, sorry, think about this, the similar development that I just referenced, they did a financial impact study, and that was going to cost James City County taxpayers just about $500,000 a year in infrastructure costs. So annually, $500,000. So this is 10 units smaller, or 6 units smaller, but it's going to be significantly expensive. It's a high cost to the city. I fully support true affordable housing, but I don't believe that that's what this will be. I looked at the transcript from the June 2022 City Council meeting, and the city manager stated that when the developer approached the city, he had no intention of building affordable housing. And so he told this is what he said, that he worked with him for several weeks, and then they came up with this new plan. So they've got this new plan, and for workforce housing, which everybody agrees we need, but then when you look at the details of the contract, he doesn't have to sell to people who work in the city. So why is the city going through all this at great cost to our citizens? He doesn't have to sell the units to workforce housing candidates. And if he doesn't, he retains them. And he retains them and gets to sell them at fair market value instead of the discounted rate. So, and guess who gets to set the fair market value? Kale Development. So, he's getting a sweetheart deal on this land. The contract is completely one-sided, in my opinion. And so why here? If it can't be the citizens, I think you need to take a look at his and his father's history. They travel around the Southeast, they find tracts of land next to universities, and they develop college student housing. And I think that that's what we're going to end up with, and it's going to be on the backs of taxpayers. Thank you very much. I guess you know I'm
Thank you.
urging you to oppose this.
Harmony Daglish, and I will apologize for mispronouncing names. I'm terrible at that. Hope I was close.
Thank you, that's all right. My name is Harmony Dalglish. I live at 214 Matoka Court in Williamsburg. I'm here as a citizen whose property abuts the College Woods, so College Woods is one of my neighbors. I am also an associate professor of biology at William and Mary. So the College Woods is a place where I work, place where I teach, place where I do research. My colleague Helen gave a really good description of how special and important this place is. I completely support everything that she has said. I have three major concerns with this. The first is because it's such a special place. One of the best things that we can do to preserve the unique plants and animals that live in these areas is to keep and preserve areas intact and not to fragment them. This development cuts into the biggest contiguous piece of the College Woods that we have, and that is a concern. And also when I'm hearing descriptions of planned development always encroaching on the edges of these College Woods, I think we should be doing everything that we can to keep those boundaries and to limit and prohibit that type of development. Second, we've heard a little bit about this. The stormwater management, best management practices just aren't going to be sufficient to protect that watershed. We have seen problems with that in other places in the College Woods that have been devastating. I don't want a repeat of that. My third concern is that I share the concerns that have been spoken today about the need for workforce and affordable housing in our city. I think it's great that we are concerned about this and looking for ways to solve this problem. I am concerned that this proposal doesn't do enough to solve that problem, and that the 15 out of 120 is just not enough to help that problem, and it comes at this great cost of endangering and diminishing the College Woods property. So thank you for listening. Hope you will consider voting no.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Cast is next.
Hi, my name is Jim Caskey. I live at 4661 Messina Drive.
I apologize for the mispronunciation.
No worries.
I should know better. I'm sorry.
Okay. I've worked at William & Mary for 14 years. I'm the director of the Environmental Science and Policy Program, and I'm also a professor of geology in there. I can tell you that faculty and students have been doing research in the College Woods for decades, and we have learned one of many things, and that is that that area is uniquely susceptible to erosion. That is, if you put pavement anywhere, the water runs off and it tears up the landscape. And the BMPs that are often put in fail miserably. And we know that because geology has published papers that have proven that. These stormwater retention ponds are designed, with these sort of lofty ideas, and the engineer puts them in and then they leave. And then these stormwater retention ponds, they slowly fill in with sediment, they fill in with garbage, and the water can reroute it and it can basically pour out in a road downstream. And I can tell you this because if you go there, there's one that's failing miserably. We call it the Grand Canyon. It's been brought up before. It's in Strawberry Creek, which is just a few drainages over. And there's that duck pond that someone referred to. When that spills, it goes underneath Strawberry Plains and it spills into this canyon. It's incredible. You can see it from space. It's a scar on the landscape. And if this development goes in, we'll have another one. And so I'm speaking to the water quality issue, both in Lake Matoka, which is just this incredible resource. It's one of the oldest mill ponds in North America. And we use it as a classroom at William & Mary, and we use it for research as well, and the Chesapeake Bay will be impacted too. I'm certain that this will cause severe erosion that will damage water quality resources both in Matoka and in the Chesapeake Bay. And I know that some business owners had brought up that they felt like they weren't approached through the appropriate channels. And from what I can tell, William & Mary was not sort of notified of this through the appropriate channels. So thank you for your time.
Okay, I've found somebody who has handwriting almost as bad as mine, but I think it might be Clayton. Cleater, I'll apologize.
My name is Tom Cleater, and I am a partner in Akers and Cleater, and on behalf of my law partner and I, Peyton Akers, we would like to lodge our objection to the plan, specifically the traffic issue. We've only been at our office, which is actually in the James City County side. It's 3917 Midlands Drive, so we're on the opposite side. A lot of people have told you exactly how hard it is to get in and out of where we are. We have the water line's right there, so there's a considerable amount of foot traffic that crosses the road. Up and around the corner off Ironbound, there's a set of, or there's an apartment building where a lot of the children go to Berkeley and they have to travel across there. You've got 2 funeral homes that frequently have many cars, and traffic gets backed up, and obviously the issue with Berkeley and the school buses. And then on the other end, there's Craft 31. If anyone's ever tried to get in and out of Craft 31 during a certain part of the day, it's almost impossible. You have to wait. And it's dangerous because of that curve right there. So what I'd ask Chair and the members to do is to consider, I really do think there needs to be a VDOT traffic study of this whole area, because it is not, the impact will be far greater than the traffic analysis. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Professor Teute, sorry, Teute, another name that I'm wrong with. Frederica? Oh, she just left? Okay. I will put that one aside just in case. Oh, she'll be back. Okay, we'll just do out of order. Rachel Tuttle.
Hi, my name is Rachel Tuttle, and I live at 309 Watson Drive. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have 3 points concerning this proposed development, which I'm against as currently proposed. The densities that many people talked about for the proposal for Landmark Village is just not compatible with what is already there presently at Strawberry Plains, which is zoned for single-family housing. It is just way too high. For many reasons, for the people spoken, for environmental and for traffic reasons. I have definitely benefited from having workforce housing, living in Strawberry Plains for over 15 years. As a teacher, it's a place I could afford. I love living in the city for many reasons. The city provides its residences. But I would like to have that same ability for people to live in a place where they work. But the development as proposed is just way too high. And it would just be not compatible with Strawberry Plains. I would love another development to be there, which is similar to the ones at Strawberry Plains. Also, I'd like to speak to the access point we've talked about. I know they've talked about the need of maybe 2 entrances. However, because of traffic reasons, but having people are going to be using both ways. They're going to come either the shortest distance, or they're going to come which is faster. If traffic's backed up, they're going to come through the neighborhood because it'll be a faster way than to waiting. I think people would rather be moving than waiting, no matter how long it might take. And then, as mentioned before, that park there, people use that park. People walk in the park, children using that park, coming and crossing Watson Drive and crossing other places. And I know people from across on James City County side come and also use the park. So it just would not be good to have increased traffic to come on that road as people are playing there and walking around there. I think, though, access should be limited just to emergency vehicles, and perhaps having a sidewalk come, or any development that's there, they could then also have access to the park. So just thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. You stepped out, and I called your name, and I'm sure I mispronounced it. Thank you. You're next.
And I'll repeat. I'm Frederica Toita. I live at 511 Newport Avenue here in the city of Williamsburg. And I, too, object to the plan that has been presented. And I first want to speak for the trees in Matoka Woods. They're invaluable. They're invaluable to the birds. You can see blue herons down on the water that goes underneath Jamestown Road. But I also have to kind of question the good faith of the city about affordable housing right now when the Virginia Gazette this morning carried the city council's decision to delay considering the low-income, the affordable housing in various hotels and how many rooms would be allocated, largely for commercial reasons, the fear about impact on commerce in the city. If we can't appropriate hotels that are no longer viable as hotels for affordable housing, why are you considering supporting building on property that really needs to be protected? So I'm asking that. And I do think that further environmental studies really need to be done before you can make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Mitchell-Diggs. No Kelly Mitchell-Diggs? Oh, did she leave, or do you know if she's coming back? I'll keep her card just in case. Michelle. Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. There are plenty more, believe me. Michelle Barnett.
Good evening. First thing I want to say is, I thought it was such a disrespect that we as the neighbors, as the residents of Strawberry Plains were not made aware. We know when everybody's running for office, but we knew nothing of this coming. And I think that was very disrespectful. I want to say the increased traffic is a nightmare. As my neighbor, Ms. Argo, we are next door to each other. We already have problems getting in and out of Watson Drive. I'm sorry, Michelle Barnett, 109 Watson Drive. I'm so sorry. It's kind of crazy because today I just spoke with the VA and trying to upgrade my house for my disability, not knowing that now I got to find a way to get my vehicle out, because this is putting us in a absolutely inconvenience. Mr. Small discussed about the traffic and how the road would be able to hold up for this amount of traffic that will be coming in the area. Well, I'm trying to understand that, because last year I went to the city and talked about the cracks in the roads that are going through Watson Drive. Nobody's been out to fill those cracks up, and the cracks are getting wider and longer. So if Watson Drive has these cracks, how is it going to hold up this capacity? My next thing is the school buses. You have school buses that come on both ends of Watson Drive. We have the high schoolers in the morning. We have the elementary school in the early morning and the mid-morning. So we're not thinking about these kids that are getting on the bus, off the bus. Not to mention, I have watched one of my neighbors of Strawberry Plains, girls are standing out there by themselves in the morning to get on that bus. To me, being a former police officer, that screams something's going to happen to one of these children. So you're putting this extra traffic going in and out of Strawberry Plains roads. Please think of the children that are there in Strawberry Plains area and the vicinity. Again, the increase of traffic, the increase of taxes, as my other neighbor brought up, that's going to fall back on us. I'm living off a fixed income almost now. I'm almost ready to retire. But I am a disabled American veteran. I already need upgrades to my home. So I'm just really not understanding why you would take into consideration something like this. Again, it takes us a moment to just get out of the area. I am 3 doors from Strawberry Plains Road. I want to thank you. I was a little bit nervous. I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. You did very well. Martin is next.
Good evening. My name is George Martin. I live at 129 Lily Street. My wife and I have probably been one of the first people that moved into Strawberry Plains back in 2004. And we received a letter in the mail about the building of this, and we were kind of outraged about it and reject the idea of this building back in the woods, because we looked at traffic going in and out, and we live right there on the corner going in there. And we just were kind of outraged about it going in and have been talking about it. And I don't think it's a good idea to put that in, because there's a lot of traffic. Like the other day, I come through Berkeley School, and the traffic's so backed up there, I'm surprised they haven't had accidents there at the school. But to put that through Watson Drive and come around through there, it's an awful lot of traffic coming through there. And I just don't think that we need all that traffic. And who knows, maybe moving in there. And we've just thought about it a lot, and we reject the idea of it being put in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Jenny Kelly.
Hi, I'm Jenny Kelly, 210C Strawberry Plains Road. I'm probably in a unique position because I actually have a direct easement to Strawberry Plains, but I also have access through Iris. And I can tell you that I take both, depending on whether I want to turn right or left on Strawberry Plains, where I'm going, or whether I'm coming home from the left or the right on Strawberry Plains. And I imagine I'm not alone, and so whoever moves into that development would do the exact same thing and just use it utilitarian. So I would say the estimates of using both ways is probably a lot closer to 50% than the 30% that was given. I also noticed that the traffic assessment data that was used by VDOT was from 2021, and if it was from early 2021, that was still during the pandemic, where there was likely a lot less traffic anyway. And as a lot of people have mentioned, they really only looked at that one entrance and exit. They didn't consider the whole road of Strawberry Plains. So I also feel that there should be another assessment done. The other piece is parking. I don't know, they didn't mention whether there was going to be availability at each of these townhomes for just one car, because we know that most families actually have 2 or more vehicles, and if there's not sufficient parking within that development, they're probably going to park along the Watson and Iris area by that Strawberry Plains Park, because that's the closest street parking that would be available. So that's another issue no one's brought up that could be a concern. And then my biggest concern is actually affordable housing. As many people have mentioned, 15 is not very commensurate even with the data that they provided, which is that 33% of folks in Williamsburg would need affordable housing. If you take that out and had students, that's 50%. They're only offering 20%. And even then, many people have spoken to this already, that is still not an affordable range for most of the people that are that target group of people that you're really hoping to help. So I really think that you should reconsider. I would, deny the proposal as it stands without further assessment or mitigation, maybe lowering, again, like many people here, happy to have more development there if it's done responsibly. 120, which is 240 cars, I think it's just too much for where it's at, and I don't think it does enough for affordable housing. And I think given more time and better planning, it can be done better. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia Payne is the next card.
to John Tyler Lane, the last house on the right across from the Getty Park, and just as you're approaching Jamestown Road. I promise not to speak long because I've heard a lot of the same things and I don't want to take time. The traffic is an issue. When I moved there 17 years ago, it's just gotten steadily worse, but we had my husband was ill, a nurse said, "Oh, I know where you live because I go through there." It's on the Waze app, so we've become the cut-through, and it's a joke to say that they drive 25 miles an hour. People who live on that road and want to walk their dog, the dogs won't even walk on the street. They're so afraid now. People that have lived there for a long time and that had the dogs had walked carefully. It's not happening. So the traffic is an issue. I've heard many good things today that I would agree with, that it's not helping enough affordable housing people for what we're going through, we think. But also on Strawberry Plains, I've already talked with somebody from VDOT, back to John Tyler, they suddenly changed that crossing over to Walsingham, and only 2 cars could turn left onto Jamestown Road. And I would see people drive a red light. So I said to them, are we waiting for somebody to be hit or killed before we readjust that light again? The same thing coming from Monticello toward Strawberry Plains. It was one day I was there more toward 5 o'clock, I guess, and the traffic, that turn signal to get on, the traffic was so backed up it was out into Monticello, and you would hear the squealing of brakes and things. I think we need to give a real thorough study of what we're doing to impact that area. I'm not opposed to having affordable housing. I think it's a great idea. I'm just not so sure it fits where we're looking at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Zhang.
Good afternoon or good evening, depends on how you look at it. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, staff, my name is Benny Zhang. I'm an attorney at Coughlin & Knowles with its Williamsburg branch. I'm here on behalf of the Stensland's Dental Studio. You've heard a little bit earlier from Lenan and Steve about sharing their own personal experiences and their objections of the Kale development. And we urge, just as they have mentioned for the Planning Commission, to defer any recommendation to City Council, which obviously we've heard tonight a lot of questions lingering and not many answers to render a decision tonight. As we all know, with Planning Commission, if you vote to oppose or vote to approve, that's a recommendation that then carries to the City Council. What our position is rather than letting that process continue to the City Council level, again, traffic concerns, environmental concerns, road condition concerns. These are legitimate questions that deserve some answers before making a well-informed decision. And one aspect of that is how I see it, a low downside and very much a huge upside for the city. From the low downside, you delay it where the developer is able to go back, commission some studies and see where it's appropriate from the commission and from the staff to direct the developer to make such decisions or such actions to do some further studies. But then from the upside, it provides more time for the developer to be able to visit the adjacent property owners. We've heard from Lenan that in the June 2022 City Council meeting, the Vice Mayor directly asked the developer if he were going to do any outreach with the adjacent property owners. Now, obviously, it's not a requirement, right? Some counties, like James City County, require some sort of notification to the adjacent property owners. And from our understanding, that has been done. The bare legal minimum requirement of issuing a letter to the adjacent property owners has been fulfilled. But for such a significant development that's coming on here, we've been down this road before. It is always best to engage the property owners. And in my case, with the Stensland's Dental Studio, where the current conceptual rendering is proposing a 25-foot setback from their property, which will give them a direct eyesight to some of the property, which may look good, but we just haven't had an opportunity to have those discussions with the developer. We think that more feedback with adjacent property owners, it's a healthy thing. It may actually help make the application better before it comes back to this board. We believe, given the comments before you, that greater study or a greater look into the road conditions is warranted. As mentioned before, the roads have been there for a long time. Even a zoning comparison that the planning director put up there is for the current RS2 zoning, it could fit 46 single-family dwelling units right now, as opposed to 120 now, admittedly, multifamily units, which is a different type of structure and different type of dwelling unit, but the sheer size, the impact of it is undoubtable, whether you're looking at 46 or 120 or even 187. I think staff needs to look a little bit more into providing the analysis of that substantial density increase and really work with the adjacent property owners, including my clients, on ways they can effectively mitigate any adverse impacts that may arise out of such development. And of course, with the roadways that have been there forever, it's an old roadway. It really is contemplated with that single-family dwelling subdivision that has been there for many years. We need to know if we need to upgrade and what kind of upgrades are needed before this development comes in. So for all those reasons, we believe that the Planning Commission, and urge the Planning Commission to defer the vote until its next meeting, give the developer the time to absorb the comments, the feedback tonight, and perhaps provide suggestions and have staff provide suggestions on what further studies may be needed. I heard environmental studies, I heard maybe a traffic or more appropriately a road condition study, perhaps a public safety study that we've seen with large developments before. And one thing I'll add, it's often not said, but given my unique experience, it has to be said, I do appreciate a lot of what staff has done behind the scenes. A lot of people don't always take that into account, but certainly a little bit more information on making a well-informed decision will be the best for the city. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I know, Ms. Shelton, you said you're going to have to leave early, so I'm going to interrupt this for just a second and ask you a question, if I may.
Yes.
There's been comments suggesting that I think, table this, but there's a clock running on us, right? So where are we with that?
There is a clock running on you. The date of your first meeting after this was referred to Planning Commission was September the 14th. So you have one more month. You have 100 days. If you haven't acted by the end of that 100 days, it goes to City Council as a denial.
So we could, in theory, table it for a
One more
month,
month.
just to the next meeting. Okay, thank you. That's what I needed. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Flannery.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Joe Flannery. I work at Pivot Physical Therapy at 4125 Ironbound Road. I'm here to talk about the traffic issue that's already here. I've been working there for 18 years, and the traffic has been steadily getting worse and worse and worse. So I think if we do this project, the traffic will clearly get worse as well. So we talk about the safety and the access to our businesses and our homes. Safety, just driving in today, there was 2 cars that almost got in a collision driving by the school. I see parents so frustrated they drop their kids off at Bucktrout Funeral Home to cross the street to come in to school. But the access and the time, just to go through a quick traffic pattern. So I've dropped off one of my kids, one of my friend's kids at Berkeley Middle School. I was driving her to school. So we get in the line. The line starts forming at 7:45 in the morning. The cars will back up as far as Craft 31 or further. So we're sitting in the car, and I asked her, hey, when does the school open up to drop kids off? She says 7:50. It's 7:52 in the morning. I'm trying to drop her off to work on time at 8 o'clock. And there's cars going around us, and it's not very well designed. And I finally drop her off, get to work, and it's just been a continual problem all the time. So my only suggestion is just to further investigate the traffic patterns, see if there's anything we can do currently, and even maybe in the future if this goes through. Maybe even better designing the drop-off for Berkeley Middle School, both before and after school, to not affect folks now as well. And maybe just Berkeley Middle School, instead of having this 8-minute drop-off time, to maybe expanding that to help with traffic flow, just other things to consider. Just want to share that with you guys, and thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Amrine, hope I'm close. Amrine.
Mary Jane Amrine. I have a business at 502 Strawberry Plains Road. I own the Pilates Center for Fitness and Therapeutic Conditioning. My husband and I own the building. We rent it out to about 7 other businesses in our building. I'm here, I've learned a whole lot about this project. I'm here about the speed limit on the road, and nobody's really talked about that. They've talked about traffic, but it affects it also. I'm at the other end of Strawberry Plains, where John Tyler Lane, intersects the stop sign. It's 45 miles an hour and it's a 2-lane road. Route 5 is 35 miles an hour on a 2-lane road. Jamestown Road is 35 miles an hour on a 2-lane road and a 4-lane road as it goes into the college. We're 45 miles an hour. There's a big curve in the road. When we come out of my business, you can't see the cars that are going 45 miles an hour. And coming the other way from Craft 31, it's the same thing. There's a curve there. I have a petition that I dropped off to VDOT a few weeks ago with over 100 signatures asking to lower the speed limit to 35. My clientele, we do a lot of therapy work, it's fitness, but I have people with knee replacements, hip replacements, Parkinson's, MS, coming in with ankle braces, canes. We help a lot of people in many ways, and they're very concerned about the traffic and the visibility. And when you add all these other things that are going to happen, it's really scary. I make a left-hand turn, other people make a right-hand turn. They're even telling me they're not going to schedule some appointments at a certain time because of Berkeley School. There's so much traffic they can't get through there. So I hope you'll consider that. VDOT doesn't seem to. They said there's not enough incidences. We have had an accident from one of our clients. During this period when I had people signing petitions, my petition, several people said they were almost rear-ended. When I'm turning in right to come into my parking area, I put my brakes on, I put my blinker on way ahead of time, and I'm always looking at the car behind me to see if they're watching what I'm doing. And getting out, it's really harried. So we have an older population, we have young people, but we have 80 and 90-year-olds working out with us. We have 60 and 70-year-olds. I'm almost 70 years old. We need to watch our time and reflexes and that kind of thing. But I hope maybe you'll put some pressure on VDOT because they think there's not enough accidents to do this, and they haven't responded to me. Okay, thank you.
Nelson, please.
Good evening, honorable members of the Planning Commission. My name is Blair Nelson. I'm with Nelson Funeral Home, 3785 Strawberry Plains Road. As you heard the counselor say earlier, you do have 2 funeral homes along Strawberry Plains Road. Buck Trout is at the corner of Ironbound and Strawberry Plains, and then we're smack in the middle of Strawberry Plains. We handle almost 500 funerals a year. The average funeral procession can be 50-plus cars, so there's already a great deal of traffic on Strawberry Plains Road. I know when we built our funeral home a little over 20 years ago, we were required to have the VDOT study. So I would echo what others have said. The traffic issue is something that really needs to be addressed. The current traffic structure of Strawberry Plains will not handle the additional traffic of 120 residences. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Steve Stensland? Oh, you already did. Yeah, those are your cards, I was going to say. Yeah, well, it's been a long evening. You got 2 cards going. Robert Balacio. Oh, they left. Okay. Did Kelly Mitchell Diggs come back or gone for good? Gone for good. Okay. Danny Schmidt.
Still here. All right. Good evening, City of Williamsburg Planning Commission. My name is Danny Schmidt. I reside at 218 South Point Drive in the great neighborhood of Kings Point. I have been in this community for parts of 5 decades now, and I have served on James City County's Planning Commission in the past, so I know what it's like to be up there in the dais, and I appreciate the work you do, and I know it's sometimes you have nights like tonight with tough decisions to make, and I get it. That's what you earn the big bucks for. Now, the folks behind me, it's been pretty clear tonight that we've got an avalanche of, for lack of a better word, outcry against this proposed rezoning. Several of the speakers have hit the cover off the ball, and so there's not a whole lot for me to add. So I've been trying to think of where are we missing things that haven't been covered. And, you know, having served again on James City County's Planning Commission, I know what's coming down the pipeline. I think you do too, as far as what's already been approved in the city for development and in the two very large counties that surround us, James City County, of course, and York County. There are tens of thousands of residential homes, units that are already approved under current zoning ordinances. So when we think about, and we hear a lot about it tonight, about the traffic, and full disclosure, I am one of those annoying parents who drops off his twins at Berkeley every morning at 8 o'clock because I want to let them sleep 30 minutes extra and dodge that time it takes to with the bus there. But they do ride the bus home. Okay, now, that traffic there, it is a serious, serious issue. And yeah, we've got the studies that say, all right, well, it can handle that much traffic. But no, it can't at 8 o'clock. And it can't when a funeral home, when they have a procession coming out of one of the funeral homes. It can't when the Berkeley kids are coming out of there. And, you know, trying to put myself in your shoes, tonight, again and again and again, what would have killed this for me is safety, safety, safety. That is paramount. We've got kids, I watch them cross that road by the funeral home each and every day, and my heart skips a beat. You know, I feel like I'm watching my Minnesota Vikings in the final minute of the game, and you're just like, yeah, come on, you can make it. You know, it's just very, very nerve-wracking to watch that. So that alone is just, I would put the lid on this one. It sounds like you can't really, I mean, you could defer it a month. What's going to happen in a month? VDOT's not going to come flying in here and come up with a more comprehensive study. That's not going to happen. Let's be realistic. So I would go ahead, and I was earlier thinking let's defer it, but as Attorney Zhang was saying, but no, let's vote no tonight. And one of my 11-year-old twin boys is at home right now wondering where Dad is because I promised him we'd be fishing for striped bass right now on College Creek. What does that have to do with this? Well, I got to come up with an excuse to tell him why I was late. College Creek is the watershed of Lake Matoka. This would all spill right in there. I have explored the Grand Canyon of the College Woods that Professor Cassie talked about. It's insane. That would happen again. You know, I'm fortunate enough to live in one of these developments where we kept much of the old growth. Professor Chambers of the college will tell you from scientific studies, this hard science, that our best water quality in this region right here is the College Creek estuary. Why is that? Because we've left a lot of the forest. These are older developments that did that. This plan here, it's an impervious situation. There's going to be big issues. The BMPs, they do fail. They always fail. And like, no offense to what we heard earlier, but seeing the plan view schematic, I know it's just a proposal. It's just a vision right now. And we talked about two ways in and out of this neighborhood. And you got to have that for safety because a tree might fall and block the road. I know it's just a sort of an analogy, but it's not going to happen. There's not going to be any trees big enough to block the road. So anyway, I'm still going. What can I say to wrap it up? So safety, safety, safity. And you know, again, having been here for parts of 5 decades, we are almost all here directly or indirectly because of 2 institutions, the College of William and Mary and the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. Let's not kid ourselves. And what are the most special things about, you know, this area? Well, one of them is been talked about again and again, has been talked about again and again, is the College Woods, okay? And the College Woods need to be protected. Not only that, like, I'm guilty. I should have known that this was not part of the College Woods and had made moves prior to tonight to find a way to incorporate that into the College Woods and not let something like this get to this point. Good night.
Okay, that was the last of our speaker cards. Is there anybody who did not fill out a speaker card who feels moved or compelled to come up? Sir? You're welcome to.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, there are more. Okay, I didn't
did
realize,
turn it in
I didn't
very
realize
late,
there were
so-
more. I'm sorry.
I'll take the blame for it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Matt Basilone. I live at 205 Holland Drive, which is also in the Strawberry Plains subdivision. I'm here to state my objection to the rezoning. The rezoning on the table tonight seems to stand in contradiction to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, I believe, is a plan that was put in place recently, about a year ago, a 10-year plan. That plan included this property zone for single-family homes, just like the neighborhood that I live in. That seems to be what's appropriate for the area, for Strawberry Plains Road. We've heard a lot tonight about the traffic in the area. Everyone's mentioned what a narrow scope it is to just focus on the one intersection. Beyond that, the greater Williamsburg community has a lot of traffic issues. Along 199, VDOT is currently trying to figure out what to do with the intersections of 199 and John Tyler, Jamestown Road, and Brookwood. They have some very creative and interesting ideas what to do with those intersections that are not well received by the community because they include roundabouts and bow tie intersections and things that would just be downright confusing. Adding more traffic that would pour into those intersections seems very short-sighted and, again, a narrow scope. I'm a teacher. Most recently, last year, I was at Lafayette High School. I know Lafayette has been dealing with some class size issues, so increasing the student population by having high-density housing in the area in a region that's zoned for Lafayette High School seems like a mistake. I'm not as intimately familiar with Berkeley Middle and Claire Bird Baker, but my daughter is currently attending Claire Bird Baker. My wife's a teacher assistant at Claire Bird Baker, and I'm sure high-density housing in the area would not be well received by the infrastructure of those buildings as well. This would also have an impact on the emergency services of the area. And we've also heard very good arguments about the environmental impact. And in summation, all of the greater Williamsburg area would just be impacted too largely for the benefit that we would get out of this project and the rezoning that's on the table tonight. So I ask you, just as the previous speaker did, to vote no. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Heather, was that the last card you have? Okay. Anybody else who did not fill out a card? I think I saw a hand on this side. Okay.
My name is Pam McGregor. I'm at 150 Strawberry Plains Road. I'm the director for the ARC of Greater Williamsburg. We serve adults with disabilities. And I'm in the proverbial corner office on the second floor of the building that sits right on Strawberry Plains Road. Have a bird's eye view of Berkeley, the funeral homes, Stensland Dental, all of the traffic that's going on in that area. I just want to add my voice to please vote no for this development. This is an area that we're now watching families, minivans pulling into our parking lot to drop their kids off to then walk over to the school. There's just too much concentration in that area. We've all said it in so many ways tonight. And the other thing that rings true to me is there was a real lack of transparency in how this all came forward. That's just my opinion, but as I've listened to all these people in this room who care so deeply about the city of Williamsburg, I really implore you to consider this decision and do what's best for our community. And I truly respect the teachers, the professors who spoke tonight from William and Mary. The difference they make in this community is profound, and I truly appreciate the hard work that you do as a commission beyond what you do tonight, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Maslin has some comments.
Thank you. Ted Maslin, 196 Lewis Robert Lane, with also a presence at 136 Millneck Road, opposite from College Woods. And thank you for giving me some practice here speaking from this side of the dais. 10 days ago, I had the opportunity to visit the Strawberry Plains neighborhood during my door-to-door campaign. Of the people who were informed of this rezoning project, none knew that it would require traffic to be routed through their small neighborhood. Needless to say, I was curious concerning what information was provided about Iris Street as a second entrance and egress for up to 120 families. I did see the rezoning sign between the two professional office building complexes. It was at the edge of the trees, hundreds of feet from Strawberry Plains Road, and would not be readily seen and certainly not read by Strawberry Plains neighbors. I do know that letters were mailed to nearby residents mentioning the rezoning request from single family to multifamily. However, there was nothing indicating the need for a connecting road through Iris Street. The agenda from last month's Planning Commission meeting previewed this public hearing and showed a conceptual site plan with only one entrance from Strawberry Plains Road. It wasn't until late last week that the agenda for this meeting showed the revised conceptual site plan we are now reviewing. In fact, when we clicked on the site plan heading a week ago, we only saw the one rendering in its place. Yesterday, I once again visited the Strawberry Plains neighborhood to see if there were any public notice signs posted at Iris Street. There were none. What I found was that portion of Iris Street proposed for the additional access is only 1 lane wide. For the 120 families to use Iris Street to get to Strawberry Plains Road, they would have to wind through half of the existing Strawberry Plains neighborhood. This after negotiating an initial bend in the road with kids playing basketball on the street at the corner of the park and 2 houses with cars that back out into that intersection. Regardless of how the vote goes today, the Planning Commission may want to suggest to City Council that we don't just settle for what may be legally required for public notice, but we strive for what would provide more effective notice for public hearings. For a city which talks about transparency in local government, how can we settle for anything less? Thank you.
I believe that was our last speaker. So I'm going to close the open forum, and this is an opportunity for the commissioners to make comments and discuss kind of among ourselves. Ms. Leibel, would you like to begin?
Well, turn this on. I guess I'd like to start by saying I do share the primary concern about the traffic that is on Strawberry Plains. I said I drive it almost every single day to go to a business that I visit over in Newtown. And it does concern me, the speed limit along that the road and the amount of new traffic that might be added by the density that could be in an RM2 district. That's why I asked the question about why not RM1. RM1, if my calculations are correct, the maximum density in RM1 would be 106 units, and that would be considerably less than the maximum allowable density in RM2. This project is supported in our comprehensive plan. On page 5-22, we do talk about developing this particular parcel of land, and we do talk about it requiring a rezoning to do that. So it is not recommended to continue as an RS2 area. But I'm concerned about the density, and that would be one of the things that I would ask the applicant to go back and take a look at what happens with RM1. The traffic, it sounds like from everything the public has said, we need to get a lot more information about what the peak traffic, and one person who made probably the best point that I hadn't thought about, 2021 study could have easily have been impacted by traffic during the pandemic. So I guess that's my comment. The traffic is going to be a big problem, and I think that density is an issue.
Thank you. Mr. Hamilton?
I agree with the traffic comments. I heard quite a story about that from one of the people in the audience this morning, and it was kind of shocking to me that we've got that sort of thing going on. It doesn't seem to be on anybody's radar to try to fix it. I don't think it's something we can fix, but somebody needs to step up and take ownership of it. I've been pondering the proposed development and whether it would really be complementary with the adjoining neighborhood. Seems to me that we might end up with something that's got a bit of a different character than the neighborhood that's already there. And I just don't know that that's going to work all that well. The existing zoning would allow you to build more single-family homes on that site if somebody wanted to pursue that idea. Now, I guess what we're also doing today is this is one idea, and we're evaluating. It doesn't mean that it's the only idea that anybody could ever come up with to apply to this piece of property. And maybe we ought to be looking for some alternatives to what's been offered.
Ranger?
I think you make a very valid point there. This is one idea. And I think it would be nice to evaluate some other ideas as they may or may not come along. We heard about green space, and I think we have some very brilliant minds at the college, and I'm not well versed in the green space, but what I heard made sense. I am very concerned about saying we're really interested in working on workforce housing, and then we're going to look at 120 units and make 15 of them maybe workforce housing, if it all works out. And then we open it up to anybody who works in James City County and York County, instead of giving some preferential treatment to the citizens of Williamsburg first. I'm also a little concerned about the possibility of the entire thing turning into a more of a rental neighborhood. We didn't plan on so many of our residences in our community turning into rentals as they are. And so if the HOA maybe had a restriction on the total number of rentals that could be allowed at any one point, that might be a plus, but we just don't know what the future really holds. And so some provisions along those lines would be nice. And but the notion that VDOT says that we don't have a traffic problem there does not give me great comfort, because I've driven there, and that's where I am on it.
Thank you, Mr. Ranger. Mr. Tarley?
Thank you. And I appreciate everybody coming out, and although we've been here a lot longer than probably any of us anticipated, I do appreciate everybody's comments, and some of them were affirming for me on my own observations. I'm not going to support this project as it stands now, and I'll tell you why. I mean, first and foremost is the public safety issue, and this road has been a difficult because it's a VDOT controlled road. I live near Walsingham, and I work in Newtown, so clearly that's the closest, the straightest line. I like to bike, I like to run. I don't go on that road. It's unsafe. 3 to 5 years down the road doesn't give me any consolation. John Tyler Lane's 25 miles an hour. I'll walk and bike on that road, but not this road. And then you have all the children walking to school or going to the park, crossing that road, no crosswalks. And we're talking about an increase of trips of 10%. 9.6% is the estimate. That's a lot. That's a big increase on that road. And so public safety To me, even though this particular development didn't put it over a tipping point, I think we've reached that. That's the environment that we're in. And then the other issues that were raised today that we do have questions about, the environmental impacts, the economic impact or the impact upon schools, been zero put forward on that. And so then what is the benefit to the city of Williamsburg? Well, the benefit we have, what's put forth, is we get, let's say, 15 possible workforce housing units, not definite, but possible. And does that possible benefit that is barely a ripple in the water to fix the problem, is that worth the cost on all these other areas? And I don't think it is.
Okay, thank you. When we are looking at a request to change the comprehensive plan, I've made this comment many times. I've been on the Planning Commission for several years, and I'm always very reluctant, very skeptical whenever somebody comes and asks us to change the comprehensive plan. And I take a lot of convincing in that regard. And so I look at it from the point of view of if this comprehensive plan is changed, if the zoning is changed, and the project is built, will Williamsburg be a better place? That's the overarching goal that I think all of us have. And you know, better is very subjective. So what does better mean? And so I start at the goal. What's the goal? Why are we doing this? And if you look at the contract, the purchase agreement, both sides say we want workforce housing. That's the reason to do it. Affordable housing for teachers and firefighters and Colonial Williamsburg employees and college employees. And they reference the GIO, which several folks have mentioned, the goals, initiatives, and outcomes published by the city. And the GIO makes very clear that fewer than 10% of the people who work in the city live in the city. And so the goal here is to provide affordable housing for people who work in the city of Williamsburg. And that's the overarching goal here. We want people who work in the city to be able to live in the city. We want the college to be able to recruit people, NCW to be able to recruit people and say, look at these options that you can live right here in Williamsburg. You don't have to live in New Kent or Newport News or Richmond or wherever. So this is a goal that this commission has worked on in various ways for some time, and we're very familiar with a lot of the dynamics of workforce housing. My initial concern here is that I don't see that this proposed zoning change in the construction project increasing density here is going to accomplish that goal with any degree of certainty because of the two provisions that have been mentioned. It's very possible, based on the terms of the purchase agreement, that not one of these 120 townhouses would be occupied by anybody who works in the city of Williamsburg. And it is possible that not one of these 120 townhouses, not to mention just the 15, would be considered in that affordable category, right? Because of the market conditions that were part of, as Attorney Shelton said, part of the negotiation process. So it's very likely or very possible, we just don't know because there's no data to know who's going to come and buy these, that we could end up with increased density with zero impact on our goal, with zero progress on our goal. So with that kind of, that overlay, I look at the specifics of the project. And when we first heard about this, we all knew there were going to be two areas of concern. Whenever we're increasing density, we predicted, we knew exactly what the two issues were going to be: traffic and the environment. And that's what everybody is concerned about, and traffic, of course, relating to safety being a part of the traffic piece. We have a busy road. We have a middle school. We have a conceptual site plan that was an initial conceptual site plan that showed one entrance to this proposed landmark village from Strawberry Plains. The entrance is actually in that school zone, which complicates that a little bit. The conceptual site plan was posted online by the city on August 12. The same conceptual site plan showing one entrance was also part of the public notices for September 14, which is about the same time that the notice was sent to the folks in the Strawberry Plains subdivision. And the real stumbling block for me around that is the fact that the conceptual site plan that's part of the application that we're looking at today. We're not looking at that original conceptual site plan. We're looking at the one that's part of the application today, which, as Mr. Maslin mentioned, just sort of turned up on the city website last Friday, proposes to dump, according to the traffic analysis, which is the only hard data we have, 30% of that traffic through via Iris Street into a quality single-family subdivision, which has a city park in the middle of it. All right. I see no compelling reason why any traffic from the proposed Landmark Village should be routed through the Strawberry Plains subdivision. Safety has been mentioned, kids in the park, negative impact on property values, quality of life. Nobody who lives in that subdivision signed up for cut-through traffic from a high-density townhouse development. We know that there are options for gates and safety for fire equipment to get through without allowing regular vehicle traffic. That's what was on the original site plan, but that's not on the conceptual site plan that's part of what we're considering today. The traffic analysis that was done was dated September 25, and it contemplates that second entrance through Iris Street. The analysis also, if you look at it, it talks about the one entrance from Strawberry Plains into the Strawberry Plains subdivision. Those of you who live there know, and everybody who drives by know that there are actually two. And so, what exactly where exactly is that traffic going to go? I'm not sure, and I haven't seen any data about traffic within that subdivision. There was some speculation from the residents it's going to go on Watson Street, they're going to cut through this way. Which one of those entrances are they going to go through? I haven't seen anything about that. The VDOT letter dated October 14 is based on this traffic analysis, and it says that has that second entrance. If we objected to that and went back to the original single entrance, would the VDOT letter change? We don't know. The public comments, which were excellent, and thank you again for all of you for being here today. This is so very important and so very helpful. The public comments highlighted some of the other important questions about the scope of the traffic analysis, and I think that's that's another issue. The traffic engineers had responded to some emails and said that they met the minimum requirements. They did what they were supposed to do. But of course, the goal of an applicant is to convince the Planning Commission and then City Council that this application is a good idea. And so doing the minimum, I think to Mr. Maslin's point, is not always going to be sufficient. And turning to the second concern, which is the environment. Somebody made the point that we had not asked any questions about the environment, and I promise you that is because we have been asking questions since this application came up. And we have spoken with a lot of people. The fact that we didn't ask questions during this hearing does not mean that we have not been taking that into consideration. I promise you. Chapter 14 of the comp plan refers to tributary streams and wetlands and drainage, and provides that that development of these areas needs to be avoided, and the development of adjacent areas should be allowed only under close scrutiny. The key phrase. The same chapter notes that significant or rare vegetative cover is an important part of the natural environment and should be respected as vacant land around it is developed. We know that this parcel, as many of you have pointed out, is adjacent to College Woods. We have written information about the potential harm that this proposed higher density development is likely to cause, and we've heard from experts today emphasizing that the harm would probably be irreparable. These experts have recommended a site-specific study, which to my knowledge has not been undertaken. So as we sit here today trying to figure out how to make a recommendation to City Council on the application that is before us to change the comp plan and the zoning to increase density on this parcel, I have concerns that even if the developer complies with every detail in the contract, which I'm confident would be the case, I have no concerns about about the ethics or the competence or the goodwill of this developer. I have zero concerns about that. But even if every detail in this purchase agreement is complied with, we could end up with zero positive impact on the affordable workforce housing crisis. We could end up with tremendous harm from traffic cutting through a single-family neighborhood with a park in the middle. And even if that cut-through is eliminated, that leaves us with a traffic analysis that we can't rely on because it contemplated that, and we've got a VDOT letter that we can't rely on because it contemplated that cut-through. So either way, we don't have the information that we really need to make a favorable recommendation here. Also, I have the greatest respect for the guidance and expertise provided by the William and Mary professors who wrote the letter, who 60 some odd who signed it, and those who came and spoke with us today. I appreciate their time, as we all do. I think there are too many unanswered questions related to potential environmental harm. We can't take chances with that. I think this proposal has not undergone the close scrutiny that our own comprehensive plan requires. And so based on all of this, all of these questions and concerns, I'm not able to vote to recommend approval of this application today based on the information that is in front of me and that has been submitted so far, which includes all of the statements made today. So with that, any other comments before we have a vote? Is there a motion?
I recommend PCR 22-.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We have 6:09, which is a record for us. I pride myself on short meetings, but when it's important, we will take whatever time it takes. I'm going to dispense today with. We don't have unfinished business. We don't have new business. I'm going to dispense with the commissioner reports today. We'll pick that up next month. Public hearings scheduled for December 14th are on our agenda. Anything else for the good of the cause? We are adjourned. Thank you all.